So guys, it's finally time to say bye-bye to the V8, as AMG has now given us the keys to the new C63S. We've talked about it so many times. Yes, the V8's gone, 4-cylinder hybrid system replacing one of the most loved engines in the history of the automotive industry. Where does that leave us? What is this car going to be like? That's what today is all about. What is the new C63 SE Performance like to drive? Underneath this beautifully sculpted bonnet is a controversial engine, as we know. In the back we've got the battery, we've got the electric drive unit in the back as well, altogether producing 680 brake horsepower, but it's a 4-cylinder. Today I want to discuss with you, as an 11-12 time C63 owner, what does the identity, what does that name C63 mean to all of us? And does this car translate into that? If it does, on what level? If it doesn't, where does this car sit in the AMG lineup? So let's find out today as we dive into, finally, the C63S e-Performance. So guys, today's episode of RBR is once again sponsored by my favourite wallet company, The Ridge. But wait, this isn't about wallets. They don't just make wallets anymore. They've taken their same attention to detail to other products now. For example, they've just introduced what is the Ridge Ring and the brand new Ridge Watch that I cannot wait to show you. So guys, I've got a full selection of the Ridge rings here. It comes in a nice rugged box, as you can see here. We're going to start with the one that matches our wallets best, which is the 3K carbon fibre. Every ring has a beveled edge and then a convex inside to make it super comfortable, as you can see, and is designed to really work with you regardless of what you're doing, whether it's heavy duty work or just casual wearing. And then every box comes with an extra silicone ring as well. There's a ton of different styles, like this gorgeous navy blue with the chamfered edge, and it's got some real heft to it. Speaking of heft, this one, the gold. I did not expect to like this one as much. And they have this amazing lost and resizing protection plan. So even if you lose your ring, or you gain or lose weight, you get the option of 2 future exchanges for the same ring. How brilliant is that? So guys, that's the new Ridge Ring, available in a host of different materials with that replacement plan as well. Is pretty cool. Now, you can get 40% off. If you go to my link, make sure you use the link. It's ridge.com/RBR. My code won't work, so you need to use the link, which is ridge.com/RBR, and you'll get 40% off up till the 22nd of December. So perfect for the holidays. Can't recommend this enough. I can't wait to show you more of the watches as well. Please do support our regular sponsors. You've seen how much we've used these guys because they're awesome. Now, back to the episode. Oh boy, it's a fateful day today as we see what the new C63 is going to be like. And not just C63, because we look at future cars coming, like the alleged CLE and future E-Class and other cars of this level, GLC, etc., all going to be using the same engine and P3 hybrid setup. So this is a slightly important test today if you're an AMG fan. But first, I think it's really important to talk about identity, because this car is named a C63S. Where did that name come from? Where did this whole legend of the C63 begin? Today, AMG and Mercedes will like to talk a bit more about the 190E, made famous by Senna when he beat a load of other people on the Nurburgring in his early days before he became a champion, and really showed what Mercedes could do with a small, sporty sedan. In fact, this was a lot of the reason why BMW felt that they had to make something to kind of even out this car, because even they said Mercedes had made a monster little saloon that they simply couldn't compete with at the time. So the 190E really started that idea. But the C63, I would argue, slightly different product. We really saw it. For me, I remember still as a kid seeing it on Top Gear in the hands of Jeremy Clarkson for the first time as he came up the rear view mirror of Richard Hammond, and he was in what he was calling then the axe murderer with headlights, which was the W204 that we all loved so much. I bought it in the same color as that lovely palladium silver, I believe it was called back then. And it was just, I don't think, and I hate the phrase, okay, all the German influencers use it, I've never seen such a brutal design on a C63 before, and I don't think even this one really doesn't do that same element that car did. It just looked insane. Today, you would even liken it to that 3-litre homage CSL that BMW have made in the type of, you know, aggression of the front end. And it had arches, yes, not widened, but probably the best arches on the rear that any C63 has ever had. Forget all that. No, we didn't care about that. We cared about what was under the lid, the 6.2-litre naturally aspirated unit that back then you'd see in SL63. And what an engine that was. I mean, you found it in everything. It found its way into SLS. It was in the E63, it was in the S63, the G63. What an engine. And it just turned this car into a rip-roaring monster, rear-wheel drive, absolutely untamable. And that's what started. You know, that was the first step. And since then, it's been huge shoes to fill. And that series finished off things with things like the 507 and then the C63 Black Series, which is probably still the greatest to date. Absolutely mental machine. I love my one. And again, 510 brake horsepower approximately in a rear wheel drive, you know, beast that was made to really attack a GT3. Hell of a thing. Sounds insane. After this, we were quite worried because the world was moving towards turbocharging, right? So gone was our 6.2, in came the 4-litre engine, and we thought, right, the sound's going to go out the window. But AMG, magicians, made it sound even better in lower speed, the 205. Stunning sounding car, even better handling, and I think the sweet spot of AMG's to date, that car, because it absolutely did everything that you would want a AMG to do in every way. It looked fantastic, it had a rip-roaring V8 and rear-wheel drive, great looks, unique body. That is what the C63 means to me. It means V8, it means rear-wheel drive, it means exciting looks and emotion at all speeds. And no car encapsulates that more than the W205. So big change then today in W206, because which bits of that have you got left over? What we have now is no longer rear-wheel drive, okay? It's a 4MATIC Plus car. You also no longer have the V8, it's a 4-cylinder. You also no longer have pure combustion because we have the electric P3 hybrid system with the EDU and the AMG Performance battery in there. So what this means is, unlike the peak of the last two models, which was both basically 510 brake horsepower, this car reaches the heights of 680 brake, which is insane at this side of the market. How does it do it? First of all, we have the engine itself. Let's talk about this because this is an important engine. So we've got the M139L engine. If you've heard that name before, M139 started its life in the new A45S, being the most powerful four-cylinder combustion engine in the world at 421 brake horsepower. This is the same engine switched longitudinally rather than transversely, and by itself produces 476 brake horsepower. It's a similar setup as you find in the C43, but we've got a bigger turbo in this one, which gives it the same amount of horsepower as my SL55 makes in the V8. So a very, very impressive four-cylinder engine by itself, but that's just our combustion power. Then you have the P3 hybrid system, which is basically a 6.1 kilowatt AMG Performance battery at the back with individually cooled cell that we've talked about so many times, I don't want to bore you about it. Then you have the EDU in the back with its 2-speed gearbox. You've got the limited slip differential and the actual electric motor. That gives the remainder of the horsepower up to 680 brake, which is massive, okay? It doesn't always give that horsepower though. It gives it at boost. And boost is a special mode in this, which we actually saw used here at Ascari to great effect, where you select a track and then it would tell you when to use that full 680 because you don't need it all the time. The car instead kind of directs you as to when you need it, and it's the same on the road. It won't use it on you don't need it going through a corner, for example, but we'll talk more about this later. So you have got 680 brake horsepower. 0 to 60 is claimed to be 3.4 seconds. That we will check later just how accurate that is. And over 1,000 Newton meters of torque is absolutely mental. Then you have all the other bits that they've changed. So of course we've got 4MATIC linked to that whole system. We've got the new 9-speed wet clutch gearbox in there, similar to what you find, say, in the E63, for example. Then we've got redone suspension here versus, say, the new C43, which has got much stiffer springs on the front and particularly on the rear. We've got more struts used here than that car for further rigidity, we've got unique kinematics in here, we've got a more sophisticated damping system that uses oil as well. All of this is going to help this car be more dynamic. The weight is quite a topic though, and this is something that I want to talk to you about today that we kind of glossed over last time. Now, all of that system compared to the C43, which weighs about 1,750 kilos, makes this car weigh 2,111 kilos. That is heavy, okay? But equally, it's a similar kind of weight to say GT63S or something like Audi's RS6. So it's not impossible to keep a car like this from feeling dynamic, whereas say GT63 SE Performance was a huge hulking thing at like 2.5 tons. So that's a different ball game. This is at a similar rate to other performance big saloons or estates that we are more familiar with. But then you have different power outputs against that same weight. So if you have the full 680, you have a greater power to weight ratio than you do in your old C63S and in the GT63S. However, if you sit at the non-boosted version of the brake horsepower, you have less power to weight ratio than the old C63S and significantly less than the GT63. So the car is more powerful, but in terms of pure tonnage to power, it depends when you're getting the boost. So it's not the be all and end all. Just because it has that horsepower figure doesn't mean that it's always more powerful than say the new M3 and the M4, the old C63. It will depend on the moment of driving. This is all very confusing for us. So we've really got 1,001 different things to consider when I drive this very shortly in a minute. Before we do that, let's have a quick talk about design. That we had a look at the details close up last time, which is fine, but I think it's quite important to actually compare this to a very close relative, which is the C43, because these two cars are closer now in technology and what you might buy them for than they have ever been in the past, because the C43 has been elevated so high, and one might argue the C63 has dipped into, you know, similar kind of waters. And when you compare the two of them together, particularly if you option them with the same wheels, which is possible for the first time ever, I don't know why they did that, it all becomes much of a muchness. Yes, our Magno Graphite grey car here looks fantastic, but you know, the Iridium Silver C43 we drove and the red one don't look half bad themselves. You got the grille and a lot of the shape is similar. The rear is pretty much identical. If it wasn't for the round exhaust pipes, you can still get aerodynamic package. It's pretty close. Interior is basically bloody identical, right? So it's not the gigantinormous leap forward in terms of design either. You compare it to the previous car, I mean, they've done a really good job with this. Of course, I still love mine, but you know, it looks very, very GT63S actually from the front, I think, which I know a lot of you have commented, and you're absolutely right. In person, it does as well. And that's absolutely a compliment to this car. So it's a good looking thing. It is, but is it 100 times better than the C43 like it used to be? I don't think it is. Let's have a quick look around it actually. It is an impressive looking car. You can kind of see what I meant by GT63S on the front. It's got some meanness to it, and in this Magno Graphite grey specification with the red calipers, which are of course the standard steel brakes, it looks gorgeous. There's no getting away from that. It does make your knees weak. It does look way more aggressive than the W205, you know, kind of teetering towards 204, I think. A lot of it thanks to that wonderful bonnet with the air release vent on top, and then really aggressive front aerodynamic package helps, of course, on the large AMG grille. Of course, the ultimate crest, a great addition to all AMGs coming in the future as well. So yeah, the front, very, very nice. As I said, wider and longer than the standard C43 or the standard W206. So it does look like a completely different car on the front, which is nice. On the side, you've got Turbo E Performance. This actually looks quite nice when it's got the chrome, because this element remains chrome and that's black. It highlights it quite nicely. Wheels are great because we've got 2020 for the first time on a C63 saloon and estate, and it gives it a lovely, lovely stance from every angle that you look at it. We are sitting on Michelin PS4S's, Great all-round tyre, as we've always tested, so it's going to hold us in good stead on the review. The rear, disappointing on the rear arches not being flared. I think the CLE will have that in the future. We've talked about that car before. So that rear element really a lot like C43, the only difference being your 4 pipes at the bottom. It doesn't mean it hasn't got stance, it's got a good stance, but it's not got M3 stance to it, you know, which is the rival, the direct rival of this vehicle. So what else is nice? The lovely extended aerodynamic carbon spoiler, the aerodynamic package on the rear with the flicks and the really nice diffuser, which is great. This car's got the extended night package, so we've got the black chrome, everything basically in terms of badging. Of course, C63S now comes with the red detail around the badge, as all e-performance cars will. It is a very good looking sports saloon. So guys, that's that element of the car. Now let's jump in. We have to drive it, we have to hear it, and really discover what's the future of AMG going to look like with this particular system. What we really want to see is what does this car actually sound like? Because when I did the co-drive, it wasn't final sound, so I couldn't even comment about it. But now this is finished. This is a final car, no excuses. I'm going to start with an emotion start, okay? That's when you hold the paddle and you get the best type of startup. Let's see what it sounds like. So that's very kind of C43, but more aggressive, a few more pops and bangs, definitely all engineered in. Nothing like the V8. You see, I just turned it to race and it gets, you know, a bit more excitable. It starts in sport when you do emotion start, which I've never seen any other AMG do. Let's give it some revs in race. There's nothing there in revs. There's no pops and bangs, there's no excitement. That is the final exhaust. But when you see what it's like when driving, that's really what today is all about. So let's head out and see what the C63 SE Performance is going to do on the road. Now AMG do say, you know, you can start off in electric mode and it's all silent, and then you leave your house and then you turn on the combustion and forget all that. I'm a C63 driver. We're going to start in race mode to begin this review, because what we all want to know is, what does this car drive like? What does it actually sound like now that we've got finished exhaust software? Because as nice as having the perks of the EV system is, what we all want to know is, what does it drive like? You know, what does it handle like? What does it sound like? Such a massive change in technology and, you know, actual propulsion power. How has that affected that legendary name that is C63? We can talk about the electric stuff later. Right, now really important that we check the launch controllability of this, because it should be bonkers, it should be. Let's see. Sounds good. Oh! Ooh, bloody hell! That was the most vicious AMG launch control I've ever done. And that was 3.08 seconds. What? I mean, bloody hell. That is fast. Dare I say that? I think that is the fastest that we've ever done in an AMG on the channel. Well, I shouldn't be surprised considering the figures on offer, etc. But you know, you do doubt that it could beat the official figures by that much, official being 3.4. Dare I say, this might be under 3 in some circumstances. And you know that crazy amount of speed that you feel, you do feel it all the time when you're using Sport Plus and race mode. There are some occasions in the other modes where it feels a lot less, but we know that the horsepower is reduced in both comfort and in sport. So each mode compared to last C63 is genuinely very different, and you only get the full whack when you're going in Sport Plus and race mode. And of course that is dependent then on when you get the boost operation, which in most scenarios, I don't need it going through this turning now, but then if I want to put my foot down as I come out of it, I get the power that I need. ESP system is very clever. When I was driving this on track, there was barely a time when it interrupted you or cut the power. It was mighty in delivering the power in almost every scenario, and it's the same on road. So we've got some really interesting roads here to drive on. A very exaggerated landscape. Let's see what this car can do. Because, you know, it's heavy. 2111 kg is nothing to scoff at in terms of weight. You're talking, you know, GT63S, RS6 type weight, etc. But AMG have proven that they can deal with that in terms of handling dynamics in the past. And actually, I see some of that same brilliance that you saw in GT63S in this car, where it's really unfazed by more exaggerated turns, and that doesn't surprise me at all. The weight figure was kind of the last thing that I was worried about when it came to dynamics. And the speed is just mad. As you can imagine, 680 brake horsepower. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it, because I'll get onto sound. You don't get that sound crescendo. It kind of just flatlines almost immediately, so you just don't get the idea of how much speed you're doing. But you look down at the speedo and you're very much aware. Yeah, I'm going to say dynamics really impressed me. I did take this out on track at Ascari as well. I didn't find that it was relevant to really bring to you in the review, because who's really going to go and track around a C63S saloon or wagon? It's not what this car is about, and these type of roads are good enough to get an idea of dynamic handling. But even on track over there, you know, it was very, very impressive in terms of handling the weight of the car. So I think weight is really much more of a side issue on this. AMG know how to deal with heavier cars. Most manufacturers worth their salt are able to do that these days. Corners that the RS5 was struggling with the last time I was at Ascari were like absolutely nothing to this car, and that doesn't come as a surprise to me. C43 was brilliant on these type of roads as well, but the 63S, you know, it doesn't feel its weight. The directional changes are mental. It does have that playability in the rear. It's definitely a rear bias system, but then you start thinking about how you wouldn't be doing this in the old one, because you'd be too afraid it would probably kill you, because it's, you know, rear wheel drive. This one isn't like that. It's all very safe. It's, dare I say, quite easy, even though you have that much power on tap. I don't know if that really translates into C63. This reminds me of E63, GT63. You know, a bit of M3X drive as well, which is where the world's going, but not traditionally, you know, AMG. These roads are lovely. Just wish there was a bit more emotion behind everything I'm doing here. Rear wheel steering, of course, so helpful in this, like we found in C43 as well. Again, helps mask some of the weight, gives you that nice directional change at speed as well. And indeed, in slower corners, you're really able to kind of point the nose in quite nicely, but you know, because of the weight, it's not quite as direct as you would find the car of old or the lighter cars in the AMG lineup. It's more kind of akin to a really fast and capable EV like the Taycan. While you've got less weight on the nose because the V8 isn't there, you're aware of the rest of the weight of the car. When I drove the GT63 SE Performance, I thought it was just too heavy in every regard. You know, it was just not enjoyable to drive fast. This is not like that. This is much more like GT63S pure combustion car, where at the 2-ton mark, you know, it's just about manageable and physics aren't ruining your day. And like I said back then, this whole P3 hybrid system much more suited to a lighter engine, a lighter setup, a smaller car, even if it is a 4-cylinder, and that's absolutely true here. The downside is that the C43 really does feel nimble, because it's, you know, 300 odd kg lighter than this, and there's no way to hide that. Similarly, A45 is another example I'd make, because, you know, using basically the same engine, a different layout, that car feels so nimble compared to this. And that feeling of nimbleness, particularly in steering, etc., you know, you do begin to miss. The steering is good in this. It's got great feedback, like most top dog AMGs do. You're really aware of where the wheels are. You can point the car in any direction you want. You know, it's so good at changing direction, but it never feels nimble. Oh, you do get butterflies from this thing though. Like, it does not handle like a car of this weight should. It's really impressive. But then, you know, then so are the A45 and the C43. They're not as, you know, anywhere near as fast as this, but they feel nimble. They give you some great feeling as well. So, man, it's a tough one This has absolutely got the speed, as we saw, no doubt about that, and it should do considering the power that it has on tap. But is that the be-all and end-all? Because the biggest topic when it comes to C63, for me, is sound. You know, it's that emotional connection that you have with the car. For example, I'm in race mode. Let's, just go into Sport Plus. Normal mode for a C63 owner to be in. Normally, in Sport Plus, for a C63, with the sound on, you're driving at, 50 kilometers an hour, you'll get a lovely low-frequency rumble coming out of the car, and you do not need to drive fast to enjoy that car. It's one of the staple things of the C63 versus its rivals, versus things like the M3 and indeed the A45 and the other cars. This is where the C63 would differentiate itself. It would be a really emotional car, regardless of what speed you're doing. This car is not like that. All right, we're in Sport Plus, I can go into race, and you get a bit of a rumble. All you're aware of at all times is that you're driving a combustion car. And that sound doesn't really elevate at any massive point in terms of when you're going really fast, etc. It tends to stay pretty much the same. So, you can drive fast and you'll just get this sound, and that's it. And when you're driving slow, you get pretty much nothing. And that is a huge part of the C63 experience. I would go as far as say A45 actually gets a few more pops and bangs than this. I think probably, although it's older now, A35 does as well. C43 probably sounds exactly the same. So before you had the massive difference between the V6 and the V8. Now, the sound of those two cars is exactly the same. There's nothing there at all. You slightly get a bit of a coming out the back, but even that, really muted. It seems to not really be an attribute of this car at all. We had thought, seeing the Nurburgring videos of the GLC 63S where it was banging on upshift, that it might be better, but none of that character is in here, very surprisingly. I stopped myself from commenting in the co-drive when I sat with Renee, the dynamics head, about the sound, because the sound software, they said, was not final, and there's no point me criticising something that isn't in its final form, so there was not a lot for me to review then. But in this final form now, I'm happy to say that sound is just not something you would ever consider. The M3 blows out the water, the previous RS4 and 5 blow out the water. To be honest, even A45 probably sounds better in a lot of instances. So yeah, that's a big chunk of the C63, traditional C63 character, pretty much out the window, right? The V8s, though muted because of OPS and stuff, still sound good and have big bangs when you're driving, past a certain rev limit as per regulation, or if you're revving it at standstill, etc. Why can't these? We know that AMG make or have made 4 cylinders in the past that have had fantastic sound, probably the best sounding 4 cylinders, some of the best on the market. So I don't know what the fear is here in making this sound better stock. Could something be done with it aftermarket? Maybe, but we don't review this car as an aftermarket car, do we? Review it as it is, and as it is, sound sucks. That's a real shame. But then, this is still a capable car. It just doesn't sound like a C63. So normally when you approach a tunnel like this as a C63 owner, you drop a few gears and you do something interesting, but here, nothing. Tunnels don't mean anything anymore in this car to the owner, but traction and speed and agility seems to be the name of the game. That, and then breadth of ability, because you're doing all this, then you just go into electric mode and you got EQ sounds and you're basically driving an AMG EV. How strange is that? But it's cool. It's a nice bit of breadth of ability, right? And you can go half decently fast in EV mode as well. Power down and then chuck it back into Sport Plus. There is a bit of a delay though going from EV into the combustion mode, I feel. It's not quite as instantaneous as you'd hope. Gearbox is good. I did find it a bit juddery on track when it was really under pressure, like between 3rd and 4th gear. But generally it's been a pretty decent, it's not the snappiest if I'm honest with you. I do miss sometimes the 7-speed dual clutch that we used to have pre-facelift, or even to be fair, the setup of the 9-speed in my facelift C63 is very quick now, so they've really honed that in the software. It's crazy with this car. You can really attack some corners at speeds that shouldn't be possible. And the steering, the rear wheel steering, the stability, the rigidity that they've added to this just saves everything and really makes the car feel a lot lighter than it is, which of course we know it's not. It's a heavy old girl, this, but it never feels it. That's probably the best thing about this car. That, alongside the maniacal speed. I mean, if we're comparing it directly to something like M3 X-Drive, that car feels way more nimble. But in the way that this handles directional change, quite similar actually. I could see them having an interesting battle on roads like these. I think both very, very capable in very similar ways. So much of modern cars is now the software and how things like ESP, the four-wheel drive, and then in this car specifically, where it's pointing the power in terms of which wheel gets the power as you're driving. You know, are you getting power from the combustion unit? Are you getting power from the EDU? All of this comes together in a way that at the end of it, you're left with a car that's extremely clever, but you as the driver have absolutely no bloody idea what's happening beneath the skin. All you know is when it comes to a corner, you're attacking it faster and harder than you ever could in the previous generation. You're escaping it at speeds that are, frankly speaking, mind-boggling, and you have a car that weighs so much yet absolutely hides it in the best of ways. Yes, no doubt, I think you actually feel the weight more when you're going slow in this than otherwise, and you do feel the physics fighting against all the magic that AMG have done under the skin. And I don't like that feeling. I like the nimbleness that you feel in the M3 personally, that light-footedness, that kind of, you know, shell sitting on top of a race car chassis feeling. This isn't like that. You feel like, you know, an extremely athletic sprinter who can run like Usain Bolt but looks something like James Corden. Yeah. There's no getting away from the fact that this is a super capable AMG. It's just not the one with the most emotion in the world, you know? So what we have is a car here that is very dynamic, handles its weight very well, good steering, a very, very impressive use of the 4MATIC and the ESP system paired together, suspension that's much more sorted to sporty and dynamic situations than it is comfort, to be frank, and genuinely, pound for pound, the fastest AMG that we've ever had on the channel in terms of pure speed. So a massively capable performance car. But is it a proper C63? I think we have a crisis of identity here. Because it's all well and good making an extremely capable performance car and giving it the badge of one of your most famous cars. But does that mean it is that car? And this is something that we need to talk about before I end the video. So guys, there's no doubt in my mind, it's pretty much the quickest AMG we've ever tested on the channel if it comes to pure speed. The handling, given the weight of the car, is incredible. The performance on track was mind-blowing as well, but the issue here is one of identity. An identity in the sense of, what do these three letters stand for, C63? As a C63 customer myself, to me it was always about emotion at any speed, not just going fast. And that came from a characterful and exciting combustion engine, something that this car doesn't have. The other thing that I liken to C63 is rear-wheel drive, because it was a car that you had to respect. It was something that you could not drive lightly. You had to master it. And again, this car being 4MATIC, it's really quite easy to get to grips with. So those elements of the sound, the engine, and the rear-wheel drive that made up the C63 simply don't exist in this particular car. So while it's a great AMG and a great performance car, it should have been named something else because it's changed so much. As a C63 customer, I don't think this badge works for this car. C63 is about something else entirely. It's not about speed, it's not about horsepower, it's not about 4MATIC. It's a different type of emotional experience that AMG used to stand for. And if we're changing that, no problem. But then rename the car. Go for like 190E performance. linking to the old car, or anything, maybe E63, because frankly this is more of an E63 than a C63, if we're completely honest, more of a modern E63. So while this is a great car, as for those 3 specific letters, I'm afraid I'll be taking them home with me.